I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things certified financial planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And today I have a very special guest who's joined me for our podcast to talk about all things CFP related. And that is Louise Sagar. Hello, Louise.
Hello. Hi.
Thanks for joining me today. And we are going to dive straight in and talk about all things CFP. And then also I want to talk about your new business as well as we go along too.
Okay.
So first of all, tell us all about how you got into financial planning and why you decided to do the Certified Financial Planner assessment.
Yeah, well, so when I was at uni, I was studying sport actually, so nothing related to finance at all. But I started working for my dad, who has a mortgage business. So in the holidays and stuff, I would go and help him with his admin. And then I ended up working full time for him when I finished uni for a couple of years. And then I decided I wanted to become a trainee mortgage advisor and follow in his footsteps. But he couldn't help me with that. So I decided to look for a role to do that. I was going up north a lot to see lots of my friends because most of my friends lived up north. So I managed to find a trainee position up there that I interviewed for and was offered the job. So moved up, I think it was March 2007. So just before the global financial crisis. So brilliant timing.
Great timing.
And great timing. Could have been better. And so started my CMAP exams. And then I think I probably just finished CMAP 1 when I got made redundant.
Oh no.
Yeah, and they had nowhere to put me. The mortgage market was going nowhere. And at the time, I managed to get a temporary position working for an IFA in Leeds on the Harewood estate, which is a lovely, lovely place to work. And it started, very luckily, the day after I got made redundant. So I was quite fortunate, really, to not have any time off and just get straight back in. But it ended up being a permanent position, and that was kind of my first, adventure into financial planning and the world of ISAs and pensions, which I'd never had any experience of before. And so I stayed there for about 3 years, and then I wanted to become a paraplanner, but we were still kind of in the crisis at that point, and there were in Leeds, the business market had kind of gone flat.
Yeah.
So I ended up, I just got with my now husband, I think maybe 3 months before, and he was living in London, and I kind of all the paraplanning jobs were in London. So I ended up getting some interviews down there and getting a trainee kind of straight into paraplanning job down there. And then, from there, I've kind of worked a number of paraplanning jobs to eventually move into advising.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a journey right through.
Quite a journey, yeah.
Rocky times, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I've certainly learned a lot over the way. So, yeah.
You probably learned a lot about yourself, did you? And about how much resilience you have to stay in the financial services world generally. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it was, definitely. And I was working with somebody who did mortgages as well in my first IFA job, because they did mortgages and pensions as well, pensions and investments and stuff as well. So I still kind of stayed in that side of things, but then have moved well away from that now. So.
Yeah. So how did you come across, more comprehensive financial planning, and how did you find out about the CFP?
Yeah, so it's probably not my first. My first paraplanning job was quite unusual actually, because it was for a firm based in Golders Green, which is a very Jewish community. And so they did a lot of people who were, I think it's called Making Aliyah, where they moved to Israel when they retire. So it was kind of a lot of offshore work back then. So I then ended up moving to PSFM, Hunter Southall, where they did a lot more comprehensive financial planning and did a lot of cash flow. So that's kind of where I first got involved in the more mainstream but complex cases.
Yeah.
But they were very much chartered focused. And I think my first understanding of the CFP, or my first introduction to the CFP, came about when I was working at Cavendish Ware, where two of the directors there had decided to go the CFP route instead of the chartered route.
Right.
And at the time, I was in the middle of my chartered exams, and when kind of as the industry, people always think that chartered is better than the CFP. And so at the time, doing my chartered exams, I was like, oh, well, all they've got to do is write a report and do a bit of research, and that's what I do day to day. So that must be loads easier than doing my chartered exams. So I didn't really think much of it then, and I carried on, did my chartered, and did all that kind of side of things. And then I ended up, after I'd had my daughter, I ended up leaving working in London and moving to it was MDG. MK at the time, Keith and Josh Button, and they're now Boost, and they are very, I'm sure you know, they're very CFP focused. Yeah. And so right from when I first interviewed, Keith was like, I want to encourage you to take the CFP, and we'll support you to doing that. So I think after I'd been there for about 9 months or so, I ended up taking the entry exam, which was the level 4 multi-response exam, because I did the level 6 rather than the level 7. So that's kind of how I got started on it, really.
So basically, as soon as you got in the door of now Boost, they said to you, right, get cracking, Louise. Yeah.
They love that, so the CFP route there. So
Well done for taking it on, because we've got a number of women that we're interviewing on this series of podcasts, and what I'm finding is that you're very thin on the ground, or we're very thin on the ground, actually. And so I think there are a lot of women out there who are doing a paraplanning role, or perhaps wondering whether at some point they might be a financial planner, but many actually very happy in a paraplanning role, and that the value of CFP, I think they're not really sure whether it would be worth doing it or not.
Yeah.
So perhaps could you just explain to us, what your journey was like? Because you were one of the final few people to do the old CFP, as I call it, the old level 6 case study, which is for the benefit of our listeners who maybe not quite as familiar with it, is basically the level 7 case study and the level 6 exam slammed together in one great big case study. So you've got to get all your tax calculations right, and all your cash flow right and everything as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it was. It's quite a journey. So I obviously heard. I don't know if it was in the press or if it was via an email from the CISI that CISI were moving to level 7. I didn't really want to. If I'm honest, I didn't really want to take another entry exam because having a young child, I don't know how old she'd have been there, maybe 2. And she was 1, I think, when I took the first exam. Trying to study for an exam and have a child at home is not very easy.
No.
So I didn't really fancy taking another exam. So I thought, I'll just carry on and do the level 6 qualification. The hard part for me, I think, which I lost weeks on, was doing the assumptions, because it's not something you really do in your day-to-day work, or certainly not in the detail that you had to go into for the case study. And I found it quite soul destroying at times. I would sit weekend after weekend on my computer trying to come up with these assumptions, knowing how important they were for what I was going to be doing, and just not getting anywhere. So it took me quite a while to get through them.
Yeah.
So I think for my first submission, I ended up doing the actual financial planning report bit, the main bit, plan. in quite a short period of time, because I was running out of time, and I kind of like, well, I need to get something in. So let's just, do something, do it as best I can in the time that's left. And then we'll see where I am and then review for next time, which probably isn't the best way to do it. But yeah, those assumptions just, God, they blew my brains a bit, to be honest.
And I guess in your business, you're doing cash flow planning, aren't you?
Yeah.
At the time, you were doing cash flow planning. But I think a lot of people do, the assumptions are automatically built into a lot of cash flow tools. So once you had got your head around the assumptions, you understood what they were there for, obviously, using them on a day-to-day basis. Did it make you look at your software differently?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. And I've carried it forward. I mean, we weren't, because when I started my my previous role, which was I took on a bank of clients, they hadn't been having cash flow planning. It was financial planning, but without the cash flow.
Right.
So I wasn't using it as much as I'd have liked to, and as much as I planned to in my new business. But because I'd used it so much previously, a lot of those assumptions, I was aware of that we needed to include. But yeah, you just kind of stick to what's already in there on a whole, and it certainly made me think about things differently with regards to my assumptions going forward, especially like inflation and stuff.
Yeah,
it's made me question what we'd used as default before, and should it be changed and stuff.
Yeah, something that's probably going to be that's traumatized you for the rest of your days now, I suspect.
Oh yeah. I haven't been able to look at my assumptions since, to be honest. So,
so let's move on away from assumptions. So what happened with your first submission then?
Yeah. So, well, do you know what? Just after my first submission, you actually did a podcast with, is it the Financial Planning Academy or something, Advisor Academy or something?
Yes.
And it came out in January. I had to check it this morning because I know I remember listening to it. It came out in January 2020, I think. So it was just after my first submission had gone in. It went in December. And I listened to what you were saying about the new one, the level 7 compared to the level 6. And I was like, do you know, that sounds like it would be so much easier because of the assumptions and stuff. So that made me question whether I had done the right thing or not by not taking that entry exam. But I was really down the path by then. So I got my submission back, and I think they said it was a good submission, but there were at least 6 or 8 pages of notes and things where I'd failed and needed to make changes and stuff.
Wow. So that felt quite painful, I suspected it.
It did, but it kind of, because I knew how I'd written it and how it ended up being a little bit of a rush job because of those assumptions. To have someone say it was actually it was a good first start and stuff, good first submission, I didn't feel too bad about it. I was like, okay, well, I can work with this and stuff. So I think I got started straight away. I asked for some clarification on a couple of points, I think, just to make sure I fully understood what I was doing. And then, kind of got stuck straight in. I'm one of these people that I have to kind of do it quite quickly. So like it be my main focus and concentrate on it in with a number of days to kind of get really into it without having to stop. And I kind of did that. Yeah. Sorry.
If you don't kind of get stuck in, I think that the time whizzes by, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then you end up back in the same position as you did for submission 1.
Yeah. So I went through and made the changes and stuff. And to be fair, there wasn't, the actual what I'd done, it wasn't wrong. It was just, there were things I hadn't thought about that they wanted me to think about, the mark examiners wanted me to think about and stuff like that. So I didn't have to do a complete rewrite. It was more a case of just making the amendments and kind of thinking about things just slightly differently. So submitted that. I think that was around May time, and then got the results. And again, I hadn't passed, but I had less pages. So I think I only had two or 4 pages of amendments to make. And again, it was quite small things. One of the things I think they hadn't actually read what I'd written correctly in certain bits. So it was more a case of challenging it to say, well, actually, I don't think you've read this correctly, rather than having to redo it.
Right. Did you feel that did it feel that you had missed bits or perhaps hadn't fully explained? Is that how you felt the comments were, the ones that were valid, obviously? Was it because you had not explained clearly enough what you were getting at in the plan?
No, I think it was where I'd said I think it was like you don't need protection because you've got there's a surplus, for example, of excess funds.
Yeah,
they'd not quite understood that bit, so they kind of said, well, you haven't given a recommendation for how much cover they need to cover the shortfall. And it's not a shortfall because it's a surplus. So I think I challenged it, but I also highlighted it in bold and like the key words just to make it extra clear that they didn't need protection because they didn't have a deficit to cover or anything. Yeah. No. So then I did my next submission, and I think I was a little bit unfortunate with when I submitted it because it was at the time I think they had a lot of level 7 candidates. So it took a little bit longer for me to get my results on that one. And I still failed. Oh, on my third submission, I still failed. But there was literally one tiny thing that I hadn't done. So my plan was there basically, but they just wanted me to consider something that hadn't been mentioned previously that suddenly was mentioned. And it was to do with if somebody was unable to work due to disability, they had their income need was reduced during pre-retirement by £5,000. But then they said, well, we want you to consider what would happen if that £5,000 was put back on in retirement. And I just capped it at the lower amount throughout the whole of retirement. So I just had to tweak my cash. I got the opportunity basically to put in a letter, a little addendum, and to tweak my cash flows and say what I would do. And thankfully that passed. So
well done.
So I got there in the end.
Good.
But I must have been the last person. There can't have been many after me to finish the level 6 because I didn't finish till about March this year. So
and so looking back on that process now, what do you think that you have gleaned from it? Tell us about the things that you have decided to do differently since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's made me think about the wider picture more. So, I'm more aware of state benefits, I suppose, which, I always tend to think I forget them as we're going, as I'm giving advice and stuff, but I think they're more etched in my brain now. So when I'm actually in real life situations, I think of things that I probably wouldn't have thought of before. My assumptions have changed for cash flows and stuff. And I think they're the main bits. It's just given me a wider, a wider thought process for when I'm helping clients.
Yeah. So ultimately, even though it sounds like quite a painful process that you went through, you got there in the end, and it's actually benefiting your clients directly, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. Yeah. So tell us about your new business, because I noticed that you've started a brand new business. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. So it's called Life Vitae, is it?
Live Vitae Financial Planning. Yeah, close. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So Live Vitae means course of life. So Live Vitae, live the course of one's life, which is obviously what we want clients to do. We want to help them live their lives to the best they can. So I think COVID and having to work at home really made me reassess my lifestyle. Health optimization is a keen interest of mine, and I realised that my lifestyle previously with commuting and travelling to the office and stuff just wasn't great for me, and I'd had sleep problems for a number of years, and as soon as I stopped commuting and didn't have to worry about commuting into work, they resolved. So I realised that actually psychologically that was having a big impact on me and my lifestyle and stuff. So it was probably only the start of this year, I kind of had the thought, what if I set up my own business? And I'm in the Empowered Facebook group.
Yes.
And I see lots of other brilliant financial planners who have their own businesses and are doing really, really great things. And I'd see them post on social media and think, I can't do that because I'm employed and my employer wanted to check, what I was doing, if I was doing anything on social media. So I felt like my hands were kind of tied with what I could do. So the seed was kind of planted in my head, and I was like, this is actually quite a good idea. And then I spoke to Charlotte Wood, who was, she was the first person I spoke to about it.
Yeah.
And she was incredibly helpful. She's still being incredibly helpful with helping me with things I have, issues I have and stuff.
No, fantastic.
And then it's kind of just grown from there. Next Gen have Blast Off, and so I spoke to them about Blast Off, and I'm on their April this year cohort of people on their Blast Off thing, And so they've been a big support as well, helping me think about things that I wouldn't have thought of, and just keeping me on track for doing the right things to set up the best financial planning business that I can.
And that's fantastic to hear. And on the back of that, did the CFP and the process of going through the CFP, did that help you structure your business at all?
Yeah, it did, because as I said earlier, the problem with my last role, the company I worked for and my values, they weren't very aligned anyway. I think probably the CFP has changed my values a little bit. So I knew that I wasn't doing things the way I wanted to do things. And I was my hands were kind of tied again with how I could do it the way I wanted to. So it's kind of, I built it almost like the way I do my CFP with, doing the cash flows and stuff and making sure that we're thinking about all the clients' goals and stuff. And so it has definitely had an impact.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So early days for your business.
Yeah.
What have you got planned over the next, 2 to 5 years or so for your business? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, as I've already said, it's a bit of a lifestyle business for me. I don't want to be, there's things I want to do in the day to help optimize my own health. So I'm not going to be working the same hours that I worked previously, because I don't think that's the best thing to be doing. So just steady growth and see where we are in that 5 years. I have in my business plans that I did with Blast Off, I did say, potentially in 5 years' time, maybe look to bring on another advisor, depending on where the business is up to at that point. But we'll just see where we are at that point and go from there. I've been very fortunate to have had a really good start, given it's only been going 2 months. So who knows? But
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Well, I look forward to be following you on social media and what you'll be getting up to in the months and years to come. So fantastic.
Thank you.
So just thinking on now, there's a new cohort of people who are potentially sat on the fence right now, thinking maybe I should do the CFP, and Louise is doing it. Louise has done it. Maybe it's something that I should incorporate into my business, or supporting other people through the CFP. So do you have any tips and hints for people who either are just about to embark on the process, or who are kind of still sitting on the fence?
Yeah. So the first thing, obviously I left Boost, where they were, very encouraging of doing the CFP, and my previous employer, they were very much chartered focused, and that was where the business was focused. So they didn't really support me on doing the case study. I had to do it all myself, and I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think if you can get your employer on board, it'll be much easier. Yeah. Because I had to kind of find time to do it around working my full days and looking after my daughter. So that made it a little bit more difficult. Also, pencil in time off afterwards, because when you finish and you've gone through it time and time again, because you're working so intensely, I found I had a bit of mental fatigue and needed that time off to just kind of clear my head and refresh a bit.
Yeah.
One thing I did find was certainly for my first submission, I used the CISI model plan or case study thing. Yeah. And that doesn't go into as much detail as they like you to put into your submissions. So I use that kind of as my, not as a guide, as a template into how much detail I needed to go into for my first submission. And in fact, that wasn't enough. And I think somebody else that I spoke to, he said the same thing. So don't rely on the CISI model plan for how much detail. You need to go a little bit deeper than that. And then reach out for help, because other people who've passed the CFP are incredibly helpful. I had help from Gretchen, Rebecca, and Amir helped me as well. So they were really helpful throughout the process. And yeah, don't be afraid to challenge or ask for feedback if there's something you're not clear on when you get the feedback back.
Assuming you get feedback back, and
assuming you get feedback back, yes, yeah.
we hope that they won't, but if they do, then yes, don't be afraid to challenge it. And that's some fantastic tips there, Louise. Thank you very much.
That's all right.
And so we are actually nearly out of time today. So I'd just like to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been fascinating to hear about your journey right through to CFP and on to your new exciting business. So I'm sure all of our listeners, including me, wish you well with your new business. And we'll be keeping an eye on you on social media from now on to see what you're up to. Thanks very much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to other people's points of view about different things, all relating to our wonderful financial planning profession. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, please pass on our details to them. So that's it from me. Join me again next time when we'll be talking all things certified financial planner related, and also dropping in on our new entrants to the financial planning profession. Bye for now.